Programming in C# and ASP.NET. This is Burdett Wilson, your instructor and guide, as we take a closer look at programming in C# and ASP.NET. Understanding Hello World. So we wrote our first program in the last video, and that first program, as I said, is traditionally called Hello World. And so now we're going to look at what we actually learned in that last video. And one of the things that we learned is how to start a new project and what that looked like as far as going into Visual Studios and building a new project and beginning to put some code into it. So we're going to go back to looking at that. We're also going to look at some of the basic formatting that we did, and also some of the very, very basic code that we used to create that project. So let's taking Hello World apart, we're going to learn a little more about Visual Studios and how it works, and C# and the ASP.NET framework. And if we remember correctly, C# is the language that we're learning, and the ASP.NET framework is actually the system that allows us to take that code and express it in the world of the web, on the cloud, or wherever that we would like to deploy it. So let's go ahead and let's talk a little bit about how that code works. One of the things that we want to look at with ASP.NET is the web page. And notice here we've got the web page. That is what our client or our user sees, is the web page itself. And if you remember correctly, we put a small label on there and a button, and this is actually a screenshot of that little web page when it was built and running. And then from that, what this comes from is from HTML, or in our case, because it's ASP.NET, from XAML, okay? XAML, that's how that's said. XAML is pronounced XAML. And so that code, that XAML code, allows us to express not only the HTML side, but also allows us to put C# code, code that we would use on our page, very basic code, then into our document, and it is expressed in this web page that we see here that we built. So then whenever we click on something, or we do something, or we ask for some type of a mathematical calculation, or to access data on our web page, that action goes back and it is reflected in our C# code. That's where the actual action happens. The things that we want to happen on our page are tied to our code there. And if you remember correctly, we had down here button click, and our button click is actually where that was pulled, and we created a string, which is a bucket to be able to hold data. And we put the words Hello World in there. We're going to talk a little more about the variables, the things that things that make up our object and our code later on. So just don't really, don't get hung up on that, but realize we basically said from now on, whatever we put inside of message is part of our code, and we're going to express that back out to the page, which we did here. Okay, so let's go to Visual Studios and let's take a look at that again. Okay, I've clicked on Visual Studios down here. It's down here on my access bar to make it easy. And here's the opening page. This is Visual Studios 2019 community version. And down here is our Hello World code. I'm going to go ahead and open that up. And it's going to pull it up, and it'll take a few seconds usually to actually load that code and pull it back up. And here we go, it has done that. And if you remember, we had our main window, and here it's loading that up. And we put a button on there that said push me down here. And we had a label that we called message, where we could express text onto our page. Both of those are on here. And if you know, in looking at that example that I just showed you, those slides, this is the design page. And here is the XAML code I was talking about. It's under XAML. It's right here on that same page. And it's expressed down here. Label message equals, here's the content is message. We actually changed that by putting on a button and putting code in that button. So this is what our web page is reflected with our HTML, our XAML code, and it is expressed when we do something, our action, our click on the button action over here is brought up over here in our code where it says private void button click, and so this is where it sends it to when we click on that. So if you start to imagine all those web pages that you've been using, all that stuff that you're using online, whether it's connected to Java or C# or some other type of language, the things you're usually looking at is HTML, and that's the expression of what the web page looks like, and it is tied to code, C#, Java, C++, Python, some other code language that makes it do the things that you've asked it to do when you click on things or look at the pages. Okay, so that is all here. We talked a little bit about this file structure and how this is all laid out over here, and that you could get to things in your code just by clicking on the pieces of it over here. Go ahead and try that and click on some of those and see what's inside of them. The two main ones that we worked with was main window, XAML, and then the main window XAML.cs, and that .cs is where our code is for this program that we set up. And so we kind of learned how to do that. We also learned that this little button up here is how it allowed us to run that project. Just by clicking that, it would send our code to the compiler, and our compiler would then run the program, would express it. Now notice we've got it set up so that it's running in what we call diagnostic or debug mode. Debug, when we're looking at for problems, we call it debugging, and that's what you're seeing over here. And so that's what's running while this is open. And you notice that it made it a certain size. We can change the size of this in our program to what size this screen is. We hit the push me button, and it gives us the hello world message. One of the things we can also do, we can change with formatting in here. We can come in here and we can change the size. And so if you see this says message, that is set down here in the type of text that we're using. We can change the type of text. Here, let's say we change it to Arial Black, and you can see that looks different than what it looked before. And all I've done is clicked on this message. Also, I can click here and I can come in and change the size of my text. So now I could make my text much bigger. And if I only had one thing going on in here, I probably would want this to be a little bit bigger than what it was. And so I could blow that up. I can change the colors of the backgrounds in here. I could say, yeah, I want this to be Arial black and not quite as big as that other, but I still want it to be bigger. I can change that around in here. I can also go in and I can change all of the colors and I can say background. Notice the background is that gray color. I could come in here and I could change it to a different color. Let's see here. Yeah, so I could pick something. Maybe I want something more yellow. There we go. And I can click a different color and change the color in that button just as well. I can also change the opacity, so I could make it so it could be see-through. And that might be something that it's good to be able to do. Or maybe I want to change my font color. I can come in here and say I want it to be more of a blue, and I could do that pretty easy. Or there is also online, there are color pickers, and I could go in here and actually type the numbers in, the red, the green, the blue, and the opacity, and I could change what this appears to be. Later on, I'll show you how to be able to put some photos and some other things to be able to give this more of a polished look when we're doing things with our page, okay? So those are good things to remember, a little formatting information to be able to use here when we're doing WPF forms in Visual Studios, okay? All right, so we've looked at how clicking this button causes our program to work, and that it's tied to our code. And so there, notice it does the hello world again, except now it's bigger because I told it to be bigger. And so that all is working, and we can see it here. This actual design page is called What You See Is What You Get. It's an old design theory of how to be able to see what's going to go on the screen when it happens. All right, let's go ahead and let's go back to our slides. Okay, we're back here to our slides. So kind of what we did very quickly, we learned about how Visual Studios works a little more. We looked at our C# and our ASP.NET framework and discussed a little bit about XAML and how XAML is the expression of the web page in our browser, and how then the code is the C# is the actions. It's the do stuff. It's where all of the work should get done pretty much for our page. And we looked at our code a little bit more so that we could get a better feel for that. Our next video is CS ASP.005, an introduction to objects in C#. Hey, I look forward to seeing you there. Make sure to subscribe. More to come.